Committee of the and we will go ahead and begin with introductions. And we will start in the room. And why don't we just go this way if you'd like to start, Joshua?
Sure, Joshua Somebody, Sebastopol Climate Action.
And actually, really quick, I apologize. We are down several microphones, so speak loud, share mics. They really do pick up a lot. We have our audio guys working on it, but so anyway, just sorry about that. Go ahead. Tom.
Thanks, Russ. Tom Conlon, representing District Corsi, District 3.
Pete Gang, Petaluma, Climate Action Petaluma, Safe Streets Petaluma.
Good morning, Tanya Narath with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and Regional Climate Protection Authority.
David Leland, City of Sonoma.
Ty Benoit, City of Healdsburg.
Shirley Johnson, City of Roanoke Park.
Andy Schrader, City of Petaluma, Petaluma Climate Action.
Zeno Schwading, City of Sebastopol.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move online. Whoever would like to start, go ahead and introduce yourselves, please.
Steph Britt, SCTA, RCPA.
Adam Garcia, SCTA, RCPA.
I'm Amy Ashley on the Climate Action Commission in Petaluma.
Jada Navayan, Principal Climate Analyst, Climate Action and Resiliency Division at the County of Sonoma.
Simone Albuquerque, Climate Resiliency Analyst with the County of Sonoma.
Go ahead, Tyler. I think we're having some audio issues, but Tyler Sylvie we have. I think, is that everyone online?
Oh, and then we also see Woody Hastings on the call as well.
Good. Excellent. All right, well, we will begin with public comment on items not on the regular agenda. If anyone has a public comment, we can pass you a microphone. Do you want to pass that down, Tanya?
There you go.
Yeah, really apologize for the mic issue. Get that fixed. Andrew will run the timer. Go ahead.
Hi there, Stephen Pierce from Sebastopol. I want to talk today about something most all of us probably already know about, but we're not really prepared for, at least in my opinion. This is 2027, where heat pump water heaters are going to be required when your gas water heater fails. 2 years later, 2029, same goes for space conditioning. This is all done through the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. So it's been a bad few months for those companies that are out there in our local electrification space. In fact, a week and a half ago, our main contractor, Applied Building Sciences, went out of business. And they're all kind of hurting right now. And we are very ill prepared for this coming deadline of 2027 and 2029. I know it seems like it's a long time, but we all know that government can run at a pretty slow pace. And this seems to me to be a prime candidate for something that the RCPA should have a strategic plan of how are we going to be ready for this onslaught. And to give you an idea, there's 151,000 residential natural gas accounts in Sonoma County, 10,000 commercial accounts. So that's 161,000. Let's say 80% of them have storage gas water heaters. Some may have instantaneous. Usually if you have gas service, you also are heating your water with gas. So that's 128,000. Average life of a tank is 12 years. So that's 10,700 water heaters that are going to be replaced every year. And I don't know how many heat pump water heaters we do now or how many we're actually capable of doing, but we are well short. This is really an opportunity for the RCPA to step up and say, what is our action plan to be prepared? multifaceted and we need to be very strategic about this because we have very limited resources. So I just want to highlight that this is it's an opportunity, but it's also a case where if we're not able to meet this demand that's coming, there's a good chance that the air quality management districts will reevaluate if we're not really ready and delay those rules. And as Supervisor Hopkins said, she thought it was the most consequential vote she ever took on climate was the introduction of these rules. So let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have any other public comment in the room?
Hi, you guys. Thank you. I'm not sure the, what are we calling it? The carbon inventory potential sequestration report is on the agenda. I didn't see it specifically mentioned, so I thought I might just make a comment during public comment. But you can stop me if I'm wrong. But anyway, I just wanted to say that, yes, I'm Kimberly Burr from Forestville. Anyway, yeah, I've been working really hard to get a tree protection ordinance passed in the county, and it's coming back on Tuesday. Be nice if you guys could weigh in on that in terms of the incredible importance of our trees to protect the earth from climate change. There's been some significant changes in the tree protection ordinance that they're proposing that are make the thing very weak, including allowing private landowners to do management or forestry on their property with no permit, including removing oak trees, which we thought was already protected. So it's a big change, and I don't think anybody's counting the sequestration value of the trees. So you guys might want to weigh in on that. But anyway, as we know, the IPCC has said that we have to protect our trees on the planet while we reduce our emissions. And I think that we've gotten kind of lax about that, where we lump all our fire prevention stuff into fuel management or vegetation management, and we're not precise about that. We should not be removing the trees. But it's not clear to me that that is the case. So even in this carbon sequestration report, I would ask that you guys question this whole fuel hazard reduction number that's out there that says that if we do all the fuel hazard reduction treatments in our forest, we'll sequester 400 times more carbon. It doesn't talk about how many trees are going to remove. It's a very odd and very unclear statement, and I think you guys should ask about that. What does that exactly mean? What is that going to look like? And how many trees are we talking about? You know, mature trees. Also, the fire numbers are a little off in this sequestration analysis. They say that once fire goes through, all the carbon's been released. That is not true. So those numbers are off, and it skews a lot of the conclusions. So, and it does mean that more trees can be salvage logged, soils can be messed up and disturbed by roads, and getting trees out of these forests that could be left alone and sequester carbon and maybe even regrow in many cases. So just things to be critically thinking about and pushing forward as good policy for the long term. Thanks so much for your work. Hi, David. Hi, you guys.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments in the room? We will see if we have any public comment on non-agenda items online. And correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, but I do not see any hands raised.
Not seeing any hands raised out there.
So we will move forward. And as we mentioned before, due to a quorum issue, correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, but we're still one under. So we will go ahead and move the meeting notes for approval next time when we have a quorum. But we will go ahead and move to item number 4. The Climate Resilience Comprehensive Action Plan presentation by Simone Albuquerque from CAAC. And I believe this is in response to some comments at the previous meeting. So thank you so much for coming to present to us today, Simone. Go ahead when you're ready.
My pleasure. So I'll just share a screen. Can everyone see that well?
Yes.
Great. So today I'm at Simone Albuquerque again, climate resiliency analyst with the Climate Action and Resiliency Division at the County of Sonoma. And we're currently working on a comprehensive action plan for climate action and resiliency. And today I'll just present kind of on how we're informing that plan and the timeline for when it's going to come to be. And I want to make an initial distinction because we're all probably familiar with the RCPA climate mobilization study. That's different than this plan in that it's community facing, county-wide, and looks at all jurisdictions. So this climate action plan is focused on the municipal actions for the County of Sonoma. So facilities and operations. There will be specific actions there, and then we'll have some community facing actions at a high level, but more so look at an engagement plan for the future to roll out those actions. So I can go into that in more detail later on. So in March 2021, the county passed a strategic plan that had a plethora of climate action and resiliency goals in it, including investment in wildfire preparedness and resiliency, investment in the community to enhance resiliency and carbon neutrality by 2030, making all county facilities carbon-free, zero waste, and resilient by 2030, maximizing the sustainability and emissions in all county fleet vehicles, and maximizing opportunities for mitigation of climate change and adaptation through land conservation and land use policies. So to address, it's quite a few different actions, and the county's been working on those fronts with individual projects and programs throughout different departments and divisions. But to understand how the county as a whole can relate to those goals, the Climate Action Division pursued several foundational studies to give us a baseline. Where are we at now? What actions could we take to get us to where we want to be, which is carbon neutral, zero waste, and climate resilient? And so for the zero waste aspect, we did a zero waste audit and characterization study of county facilities and operations, a municipal greenhouse gas emissions audit, looking at the sources of emissions from the County of Sonoma buildings and operations, a carbon stock inventory and potential sequestration study, which was mentioned earlier. This one's quite unique actually because it looked county-wide at where our carbon is stored in our natural and working lands and urban lands, and how we could enhance carbon sequestration in the future. And then finally, a comprehensive energy plan and audit of county operations. So I'm going to go through each one and I'm going to share some of their high-level takeaways, but I highly encourage folks to go on the county website and review these plans. You can find them on the Climate Action and Resiliency Division's website, as well as in board meetings, recordings, and minutes. So the greenhouse gas audit showed us on the left, you can see a bar chart, and it's showing total greenhouse gas emissions in multiple years, 2017, 2019, and 2022. That accounts for the 3 bars. And ultimately, you can see that emissions are reducing over time. This is largely a consequence of the pandemic, which reduced employee commutes. There was also decommissioning of a fuel cell that reduced emissions from the county. And each year is broken down into emissions categories. And so you can see that employee commute, solid waste production, transportation activities, and energy use are some of our big emitters for the County of Sonoma. So our baseline emissions from 2021, which we'll build off, is 31,712 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And so that's what we're trying to reduce. So on the right-hand side, this is what's called a wedge analysis. So the thick line at the very top is a business as usual situation. So you can see from 2017 to 2021, you can see that reduction that we also see in the bar chart. But then if you look forward to 2030, that line is actually slightly increasing. So as we kind of come back to normal with commuting, et cetera, our emissions aren't decreasing, they're coming up. Each wedge under that line in green shows our state commitments based on different law standards that have been passed that will reduce our emissions as a county. And then below that in the beige tones, you can see potential county actions that we considered that would further reduce our emissions. At the very bottom, there's that gray wedge, and that's our emissions gap. So with a list of activities that our greenhouse gas audit considered, there's still a need for more actions to address that 8 tons of greenhouse gas emissions that remain if we simply do the actions considered in the greenhouse gas audit. So in the zero waste audit and characterization study, we looked at a subset of county buildings, sampling sites. So these buildings were either really unique in the waste that they produced or representative of other sites throughout the county. And we did a audit. So we pulled their bins right before they got picked up by our ecology. We weighed them and characterized them several times. And on the left-hand side, you can see the waste composition throughout the county. And there are a lot of organics, 25.9%, and paper, 19.4%. Those are things we can divert outside of the landfill. So we have really important opportunities to reduce what we're sending to the landfill and instead compost it, recycle it, etc. On the chart on the left-hand side, it's breaking down the waste composition by each of the sites that were sampled. And in dark green, that's other. But in bright green, you can see compostable. And in blue, you can see divertible. So again, it's showing you that there's a lot of divertible and compostable materials that can help us, if we manage them wisely, it can help us get to zero waste. The study also gave us several recommendations, including outreach and education to our staff and visitors for sorting, and also different county policies around subcontracting and procurement policies that could incentivize zero waste partnerships, as well as a construction, destruction, and demolition ordinance that would address how we're building and how we're deconstructing buildings to reclaim supplies. So now I'll go on to the carbon stock inventory and potential sequestration study. So again, this is looking at countywide, whereas all our other studies are looking specifically at the County of Sonoma facilities. We broaden this one out because we know that our facilities alone will not be the full solution we need to be climate resilient, because carbon sequestration both has the benefit of reducing emissions, but also just makes our natural lands, which are a really big part of Sonoma County as a whole, more resilient to climate impacts. And so on the left-hand side, you can see the County of Sonoma broken into different land categories. And in bright orange, you can see the county lands. In green, you can see the lands owned by ag and open space. In beige, you can see public lands. But as you can tell, that light brown color that is predominantly on that, that's private lands. So a really big part of the solution is going to be community facing. And the ways in which we considered sequestering carbon into the future were by looking at USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service practices that have been shown to both sequester carbon, but also have tons of multiple benefits, including water quality, habitat, decreasing temperatures, etc. So some of those would be composting to enrich soils, restoring creeks and waterways, increasing urban green spaces, and prescribed grazing on grasslands. So that was a really high level overview of those. And actually, I want to go back really quickly and address the public comment we had earlier. So urban green spaces, we did a tree canopy analysis in urban spaces as part of this report. I recommend folks go take a look at that considers equity and really looks at where we can promote tree planting in the county. And if you look at this, I think we had one more. I thought we had one more slide, but essentially, if you look at the analysis of where, we lost it, where our carbon stocks are, they're primarily in our wetlands and forests. So the study really harps on how important it is to protect our forests in Sonoma County as one of our major carbon stocks. And again, we tried to quantify some of the impacts, the carbon stock losses that we as a county faced from wildfire and several years of drought. And the study unpacks why that's really challenging to show a direct correlation between carbon stocks and those kind of widespread, the widespread impacts of wildfire and drought. But it attempts to do so and then adds some geospatial analysis to help us better understand specifically where we can probably see those impacts directly rather than having some abstract number. So all that to say is those studies are going to inform the plan, which will be a list of municipal actions and some preliminary community-facing actions. The plan will also have several other aspects to it, including robust public input. It'll frame potential action pathways for the board because we obviously need to think about how are we going to fund a lot of this work. And to help us do that, there's going to be a cost benefit analysis of the different actions proposed and an implementation plan. And that'll come to the board this August. So we've been working, we've held several public climate workshops to both present on the foundational studies as they've come out, and as well as other projects and programs in the county, like our Climate Resilience Fund, and held a community hall in November, again, to present on the Climate Action Plan. We're currently drafting those actions with as much community and partner input as we can gather. We went to the board in December for another public meeting to present what we had so far. And so right now we're prioritizing actions and engaging in that cost benefit analysis. And you'll see the plan come to the Board of Supervisors August 13th. And right now we're really focused on getting input on what those actions look like, what are community priorities for the County of Sonoma, but also the county at large. That'll be a concerted effort that will go on far beyond August. And as I mentioned, we held several events to that effect. But in the chart in the middle, you can kind of see some of our engagement numbers. There are 120 other responses on atop of this, but we hadn't updated this slide before the presentation, so our apologies. But you can see that drought and wildfire are really big priorities for our communities, obviously, as well as extreme heat. But there's considerable interest in many climate hazards that we're facing as a community. And so at the end of my slide, I just have this QR code for you all in case you want to take the survey or share it out, or share out flyers to local community businesses or spaces where you think we can get engagement. And this is has been shared with RCPA too, so we can maybe send this out if folks want the PowerPoint itself. And that's all I have. I'll stop sharing and open it up for questions if now's the time.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions from I'm in space. Any questions from committee members both in the room, but I do see committee member Tyler has his hand up, so sounds good, Drew. Go ahead, Tyler.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation. Sounds like a lot of work, a lot of research that will obviously, help with decision making going forward. I wanted to clarify a part about the waste data that you collected that, according to my back of the napkin calculations, something more than 40% of county waste is recyclable or compostable, but is not currently being diverted. Did I understand that right? And if I did, what is the explanation for that? Does Recology not offer those services for commercial customers, or maybe you could explain that?
Yeah, so the county's working closely with Recology to just end zero waste Sonoma to make sure that there's proper bins and signage, and there's all the ways in which we can sort so that we have organics being diverted to compost and away from the landfill. This is saying that those compostables, those divertibles were found in the landfill. And so there's a lot more work we can do to make sure that our staff and visitors are sorting properly and have the tools to be successful in our pursuit of zero waste. We did compare our study to a study Zero Waste Sonoma did on commercial facilities throughout the county. And we aligned very closely with their waste composition. So it looks like this is just kind of where we're at in this huge statewide push, which 1383 is a big part of that, which is a regulation that is monitoring and tracking organics being diverted outside of landfills, as well as other zero waste activities. So yeah, we definitely have our work cut out for us. But there's a lot we can do. So exciting actions to come.
Thank you. Any comments in the room?
Thank you.
Could we go back to David Leland, could we go back to, I think it's the first slide where the metric tons of CO2 overview numbers were presented? So on the left, it says nearly 32,000 metric tons of CO2. And then after all of the actions are taken, there's just at 8 tons left. It looks to me like that's more like 8,000 tons. Is that right? I mean, there's a line on the graph there on the right that says 10,000, and the gray wedge is just a little bit less than that. So it looks like it's about an 80% reduction rather than a nearly 100% reduction.
Yeah, you caught my typo. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Could you give us all a sense of what percentage of overall county emissions are represented by the county's own emissions? What percentage of total countywide activity-based emissions are you tracking in this study?
That's a really good question. And I think that's something we could dig into other reports and plans to get. Like, I think RCPA's work is very emblematic of that, right? Where we're looking at each jurisdiction separately. And thus far, our work has solely focused on county emissions, not necessarily in comparison to other commercial facilities or in comparison to the county as a whole, but just where are we currently as a county in the past few years, and where do we want to be?
Thank you, because my understanding is that typically municipal operations are around 1% or less of total community-wide emissions? I just wanted to try to get a sense to put this all in scale. And just one more quick question. In spreading this message countywide, do we have any goals or do we have a plan for public outreach and engagement?
Yeah, so I hear that comment and I think it's really powerful because I think the carbon sequestration slide that did look at countywide, our carbon stocks countywide and how we could protect those hits out a little bit better than the other studies I presented on, but essentially the county is a small piece and we definitely want to address our emissions here first, but the community at large is a really big part of us being climate resilient as a full county. And so the part of the plan that addresses that will be the community engagement portion, which will outline a strategy for outreaching to community-based organizations, the public, et cetera, in interviews, surveys, more than we're doing right now. We'll build on that to get more robust feedback and then come back with a community-facing plan. Because that's going to be much more of a concerted effort in partnership rather than this plan, which is looking at what does the county really have control over in our operations and how can we start there.
Matt, you have one more comment?
I was just going to follow up with on Pete's question. When Tom and I did an inventory for the city of Sonoma's municipal operations, we compared that to the countywide greenhouse gas inventory and came up with a number that was less than 1%. But there's some special circumstances in Sonoma. The police department is under the is part of the sheriff's department, and some of the fire services were not included in our inventory. So I think your number of a guess of very low single digits, 1 or 2, is probably about right.
That's all we had. Andy and Shirley.
Thanks for the presentation. We definitely appreciate all the hard work you and the team are doing over there at the county. A quick follow-up to one of the public comments, actually to both of the public comments. I was also aware that ABS went out of business, the HVAC provider, and given that that work is essential to the implementation of the plan, do you have any sense? And given this is out of the scope of your presentation today, but is there any sense of why HVAC providers are going out of business at a time where they should be doing very well?
If I were to answer that, I don't want to go out of my depth here because also, to be fair, my personal background is in natural and working lands. But I think we can get some of those. I think that the energy audit for the county will speak to that. And there's a lot of community facing energy programs that the county already runs, like in partnership with BayRen, the Skype financing program, et cetera, and workforce development in that transition and having a just transition is a really big part of county priorities. So I don't want to speak to that just off the cuff, but just note that it is a really big part of county planning, and we could come back and bring that back to you all at a later date. I think there was a recent presentation about it a bit, if I'm not mistaken. Or that could have been the board meeting, but.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the RCPA staff could brief us on that a little bit, or if you have any further information. So maybe more in your wheelhouse. Given how the drought could come back at any time, has there been any study about how healthy soils and restorative agriculture can store more water in kind of the healthy soils context?
Yeah, so the carbon stock study and potential sequestration analysis looked at a plethora of USDA and RCS standardized conservation practices, many of which promote healthy soils and are supported by the California Department of Food and Ag. And so you can look further into that study. We did try to quantify multiple benefits for each practice. So you can unpack for each practice the many different things it might do. As you mentioned, soil water holding capacity is of big interest. Reducing localized temperatures by increasing shade is of interest. Also making sure that we're doing things like cover crop or composting to maintain the integrity of our soils is really important. So yeah, lots of good practices there. And we did look at drought in general. It was challenging to pinpoint the impacts on carbon stocks from drought, but to note that it is a significant, it does significantly influence the ability of our forests to store carbon for us. So it's of concern. And so having those healthy riparian ways, healthy soils, reducing high severity impacts from wildfire are going to be key to avoiding those negative impacts of prolonged drought. They're all interconnected.
Thank you.
Shirley and then Tom.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm glad you put comprehensive in your title, otherwise that that acronym could have been troublesome. So where are you? I know the Board of Supervisors, they're very frugal. So where are we going to get money for this plan?
Yeah, we're having to get really creative on that front. I mean, I think climate action planning in general, it's like where we know there are costs, really big costs, if we don't do climate action planning, right? When we do have those climate hazard impacts. But it is challenging to face the short-term costs of implementing these actions all at once so that we can be climate resilient. So we're doing a cost benefit analysis that will hopefully help us balance those two. But we're looking at creative funding mechanisms for energy improvements. We can sometimes look at the energy savings of infrastructure over the lifetime of the equipment. And that's where we can look into getting those funds. You know, they're already spent. It's just a matter of whether they're spent now or within the 30 years of that infrastructure. We're also looking at creative funding mechanisms in partnership with other organizations for the natural and working lands actions. So there's currently a partnership called the Sonoma Marin Ag and County Climate Coalition, or SMAC for short. And this is a $10 million pilot project funded by the USDA to increase the pace and scale of carbon sequestration actions throughout the community on working lands throughout the county. And the county is acting as the fiscal sponsor for that grant. A part of that pilot is looking at sustainable funding mechanisms to keep that pace and scale of implementation up. So we're working with partners on that. But yes, at every corner, we're looking at how can we sustainably fund this? Where can we find funds that are already, say, earmarked for fleet transitions, but just make sure that they're electrified vehicles, et cetera. So we're getting kind of creative, and that'll be a big part of the plan.
Simone, thank you. I want to join my colleagues in appreciating the amount of work that's going into this, and you know, multiple reports all on a similar timeline coming together for comprehensive action. Our job on this committee, of course, is to help guide and support that effort. So I have a couple of questions. First, will the PowerPoint presentation you showed us today be available with the typo fix on our RCPA website?
I think we can provide the PowerPoint for sure. That was maybe a RCPA question as well.
That would be
We
appreciated.
can definitely send it to them.
Great. That would be appreciated, because sometimes it feels, and this is why I really appreciate you coming to meet with us today, is what's going on over in CARD is oftentimes, it feels like it's at arm's length to this county-wide roundtable. So very much appreciate you being here today.
Yeah.
Specifically on the municipal inventory, one thing that jumped out at me, I spoke to BC about this, I failed to follow up and give him the documentation, but I noticed that your highest gas using account was unidentified. in the report that came out. Have you had a chance to identify that, or is that still an open question about what is our largest gas use under the county's operations?
I can look into that. Yeah, that would definitely, that's a helpful reference. And if you want to share the specifics of that in the chat, I can look into that and get back to the group.
Okay, I'll follow up with UNBC as it promised and failed on my part. Curious too, if employee air travel was included in your transportation employee commute numbers? We did that in Sonoma. It was fairly trivial, but just helpful to get people thinking about that. We're seeing universities and other institutions starting to take that into account.
That's a great question. I can look into that and get back to you. I believe most of our numbers are coming from our Clean Commute program, which are tracking employee commute kind of on a daily basis. And I'm not sure there is air travel included in that, but I can look into it.
Right. Just anecdotally, what we did in Sonoma is we simply surveyed the employees of the city. We also did this for the Valley of the Moon Water District in the inventory we did for them. And they go to conferences. They have a certain amount of budgeted travel per year, and it's a trivial equation to get that number. In the carbon stock inventory and potential study, will you be integrating the county-owned lands carbon stock into the municipal inventory in this first iteration? The reason I ask is the principle I'm hearing about around the world now is the idea of insetting, using our natural and working lands to inset carbon sequestration against the emissions of the entity. For example, if you're a farm, you'd want to acknowledge your greenhouse gas inventory emissions and then inset your own sequestration improvements on that parcel, on that land base. And that principle is coming out of Australia, where they have already gone forward in setting some subsidies for natural sequestration and finding that it's causing distortions in where the money's flowing. So it's an important issue for us as we begin to embark on that here in California and in Sonoma County specifically. Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's definitely an important issue. And that Sonoma Marin Ag and County Climate Coalition that we're partnering with the Marin Carbon Project that's been facing this question for quite a while now. So looking at different types of carbon sequestration activities and models. We are specifically looking at how we can sequester carbon on county-owned lands. So how do ag and open space easements reduce development impacts? How can the way in which we treat our regional parks sequester carbon and make us more climate resilient? How can we protect our watershed on Sonoma water-owned lands? And those aren't all in direct control by the Climate Action and Resiliency Division, but we're having a lot of internal discussions and collaborations around how our work can overlap to promote that goal. And then looking county-wide at carbon sequestration for Sonoma County resilience as a whole. So all that to say is our initial steps are really focused on lands where there's some degree of control by the county, and then broadening that out in a community facing effort next. Right,
because in principle, you mentioned prescribed grazing and compost. And in the case of prescribed grazing, IPCC and others are pretty clear on the fact that every additional ungulate, every additional farm animal, cattle or sheep or whatever, has a net positive impact on the climate. So if we're using them for grazing, while grazing, certain method of grazing might be an improvement over a past method of grazing, increasing the number of total cattle in Sonoma County would be actually a net, it would have a bigger cost in our climate actions than it would in terms of savings. So
I think
about.
I think that's important in that we really need to look at how is Sonoma County unique, right? Our natural working lands are a large portion of our county. And so they need to be a large part of our climate solution. And so when we think about grazing our natural lands, we're not necessarily saying let's get more cows just for grazing that we then, in the off season kind of put away and store and then bring them back out to graze. We're talking about the fact that we have a really important food economy in our county that has ungulates and grazing animals as a part of it. And there's a way they can be a part of fuel reductions and maintaining really important grasslands that are disappearing throughout California.
Thank you, and appreciate the indulgence with all these questions, but I have one more, and that goes to the modeling of carbon in soils. And I was curious if you've been following the proceedings at the under the California Air Resources Board AB 1757 Expert Advisory Committee. This is the scientific committee that's been put together to advise CARB on future scoping plan and the state legislature on policy changes that might involve subsidies for carbon sequestration. I attended a meeting last week or week before last in which there was scientific reporting done where basic takeaway finding is that while you can add carbon to the soil and that increases storage over about the first 5 to 10 years, it also increases nitrogen. The more carbon you have, the more nitrogen activity you have. And nitrogen is a very powerful greenhouse gas forcing factor. And they call that the nitrogen dilemma. And so this body is having a hard time seeing the net benefits. And they're actually working with Jackson Winery here in Sonoma County and finding that the any kind of, while it's important to do organic agriculture, it's not likely that there will be a true market you'll not be able to justify spending the money that it will take. It comes from other benefits like brand enhancement of the wine or something like that. So it's something for you all who are looking at these numbers to, I think, pay close attention to, make sure the nitrogen off-gassing as a part of increased carbon sequestration and how that's going to net back some of the gains we were hoping to count. Does that make sense?
To that, I would just share that the Sonoma Marin Ag and Climate Coalition is funded by the USDA Partnerships and Climate Smart Commodities Grant. And this is a $3 billion grant by the USDA to look into market mechanisms for carbon sequestration in our food systems. And so this is a really complex question that we're only beginning to understand how we could quantify the benefits of some of these conservation practices that are climate smart or sequester carbon into our above ground biomass or soils, et cetera. But I would just put out there that our local efforts by our resource conservation districts, our UC Cooperative Extension, these technical service providers that are out there helping our working lands be resilient to the climate impacts that they're facing every day, are really looking more at a multi-benefit approach. So when we look at riparian restoration, I don't think most of us would say that the carbon sequestration is the biggest benefit, right? There is a significant benefit to restoring your creeks and streams when quantifying carbon sequestration, but we all can see that the big benefit there is water quality, fish habitat, green spaces that we all enjoy, resilience to flood, resilience to drought, having a refill of our groundwater. Though there's a litany of multiple benefits, and that presents a real challenge for quantification. How do we quantify that, value it in a system where we're used to just looking at carbon dioxide equivalents? And so there is just a lot of discussion going on what that's going to look like and how we can broaden our minds or adapt our systems to look at things that are really different than energy savings or different types of energy sources. So we're definitely engaging in that conversation, but I wouldn't say we have all the answers.
Thank you again, Simone.
And I want to be sure we have time for the GHG item. Any last comments in the room? Go ahead, Zeno. Before we go to public comment.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, to what extent the county sees itself as a leader among jurisdictions in the county. I'm from a very small town with barely any staff left, and I feel in our town we have a great need for support from larger, more financially healthy bodies. And so you're making this report, all this input, and it would be a waste if other jurisdictions couldn't learn from that. So I would wonder whether you have plans to reach out to jurisdictions to help them improve their own municipal plans.
That's a great question. And I definitely think we're hoping to do this in collaboration for sure. And we're also one of those small climate action planning divisions just growing to try and meet all the needs. But in the case of the carbon stock inventory and potential sequestration study, that was a county-wide study. And so we're working to make those geospatial layers available to all partners so that you could just look at your jurisdiction, where are your carbon stocks or carbon sinks, and where are there opportunities within your jurisdiction for sequestration. So we're working with RCPA on getting some of that data up on their website. And we're also working on making it more accessible through our county channels. And then hopefully in our community facing actions, there will be more county-wide activities as well that can be shared out. I think there's also collaborative efforts. So if you look at the tree ordinance that's been getting worked on lately, I know a lot of jurisdictions are also pursuing their own tree ordinances. And so at least we can learn from each other as these go out to the public and get feedback on what community priorities are as a whole.
Excellent. And we're going to go ahead and go to public comment. I see John has his hand up online.
Okay, thank you. John Shribs, Vice Mayor of Petaluma, and also on the liaison for the Climate Action Committee down here in Petaluma. I'm also on Ag and Open Space now too. So I want to start with the micro, and then go to the macro situations on the micro scale. Well, first off, I want to thank you for all the work that you are doing. It's great to have more leadership at the county level across the board. But at the micro level, when I go to our community center and see what's happening in the 3 different bins, people just don't know exactly what goes in each, and it's a mix and match sometimes. So there needs to be a huge education, not just putting up signs above cans, but actually we need to educate about, okay, what it is that we are putting in there, and then figuring out which one, where should that go. So there's a different educational thing that needs to happen with, okay, not just pictures above bins, because when you get your cup, okay, is it wax lined or not wax lined, whatever. So there's huge education there. Also, what we put in our bins, I know I've accidentally, or I shouldn't say accidentally, I did put in some larger metal pieces I thought would be recycled that way for small metal pieces that I disassembled and put the plastic in there separate from the metal. Thought that was nope, that's not okay. So that education, so the recycling centers. And then from that point forward, there also needs education on where does it go after we send it to the recycle center, because my understanding is a lot of it doesn't get recycled at that point, from that point forward. So we need to do more from the county level on controlling or enhancing the recyclable materials handling. Not only that, but actually recycling them here in the county, not sending them to China or somewhere else way far away. Which brings up, and then going toward macro, we need to do more on our landfills and where we're going to put things and not be able to have to train them all the way to Nevada or whatever. So I would hoping to see a little bit more on our future for for waste management entirely and recycling, and having a lot more controls here down the road. I was hoping to see more of that happen. Then Pete Gang mentioned that also looking at the county alone is only 1% versus total. And I think we need to talk more about housing and transportation, what the county is doing, because that's where most of the emissions are coming from, is that combination of housing, where we have people housed, and then where are they working and getting transport to there. And that's like 75% of the issue and the problem. And that really needs to be worked on from a policy standpoint. What McGallagher is doing and others, we need to really work on those issues as a very high priority for the carbon. So I just thought I'd just add those comments in to think about. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Any additional public comment in the room or online? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move to the next item, which is one that many of us are pretty excited about. Item number 5, the RCPA Climate Action Dashboard. We have Adam Garcia to present that today. Go ahead, Adam.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be sharing with you this great project that I think is a long time coming. I recently joined a little over a year ago, but I know that the request for trying to make this data around our greenhouse gas emissions just more publicly available, easy to access. BC, did you want to give a little bit of an introduction beforehand?
I would like to. Use this entry here, so the PowerPoint, is that possible to move forward? It's in the CAAC presentations folder. Just a couple of slides.
Great, thanks. I'll pass it over to you, BC.
Okay, great. And I'll pass it right back in just a second. Thanks, Adam. And we can keep this quick. Thank you, everyone, for having us here. My name is BC Capps, Climate Programs Manager here at RCPA, and wanted to just provide a little bit of background information that members of this body probably are already aware of, but a little bit of context for the work that Adam has been working on. And I'll just go ahead and and Drew, if it's not there, you know what? I think I can talk through this without without the slides. They're helpful, but I know the content. So in general, RCPA has been conducting greenhouse gas inventories every 2 years. It's still okay. And I apologize for not giving you the heads up. And if we'll go to the next. Oh, and then you can go one more slide.
Adam, can you confirm that you can see that? Thank you.
Okay, great. So as everybody is aware, or most of you here are aware, RCPA has been conducting countywide greenhouse gas emissions inventories approximately every 2 years for the last a decade or so, and we have approximately 30 years of GHG inventory data available that we have collected over the years. That's broken down using the ICLEI protocol. It's basically broken down into 5 different analysis sectors. We've been collecting information on building energy, transportation, water and wastewater, agriculture, and solid waste. That information is presented to the board each year with the report produced, but then that information really has been contained within a PDF document, a couple of graphics on our website, and then but not a lot of access to get the information so that people could really dynamically interact with it. So if we'll go to the next slide. So Adam and I and several others have been working on an online climate dashboard to try to be a viewer, to use as a viewer for much of this information. We've identified 3 primary kind of user types: local government staff, community advocates, and general public users. And some of the initial functions that we're talking about that we built into the initial tool have to do basically with being able to search through and filter that community-wide inventory data that covers 1990 through 2020, filter that data by the sector, by the year, or by the jurisdiction, also look at total GHG emissions versus per capita emissions, and building in some tools to compare emissions trends versus reduction targets, and then being able to present this as a countywide emissions map. So with the next slide. And so what Adam is going to show today has those features built into it. In parallel and moving forward, we're looking to build upon this, and we'll continue to make improvements to this. We're looking to improve the ability to download data for further analysis, to get it out of this tool that people could use it via Excel. We're going to create a series of jurisdictional specific pages. One could zoom in City of Sebastopol and just look at that information kind of grouped together on a page. We're also going to integrate a number of work along a climate action tracker that's going to be look at climate action plans being produced by a number of the jurisdictions. The county's comprehensive climate action plan they were just talking about there is one of those types of plans that we'll hope to integrate those actions into this. We're going to be able to add some additional household and business related recommendations. And also looking to be able to track carbon sequestration projects similar to, I think, some of the questions that were tossed out at Simone in the previous presentation. And we're also going to incorporate a number of social equity indicators or resilience metrics. Andrew, one last slide. And so one of the things kind of that we're looking at here is this will be some data that can be displayed alongside the emissions inventory data. So it'll be things like, say, for just thinking about transportation. For transportation, we use vehicle miles traveled goes into our calculation models, and then we get out GHG emissions. Well, there's some parallel stats that could be very useful at looking at in relation to that. Number of EVs sold across the county, number of gallons of gas sold, throughout the county, trends over years, and being able to look for, we're seeing VMT say remain steady, but we're seeing EV sales go up, and we're seeing gasoline sales go down, and so therefore our emissions are reducing, even if VMT is staying the same. So we're hoping to be able to pull those indicators together and be able to present that in kind of a future iteration of this model. And we're currently working with an intern who's helping us to kind of collect some of that information. And we also had, I think, a very informative meeting. It was about 2 weeks ago or so, met with several members of the City of Sebastopol, kind of their climate data team, climate metrics team, and I think got some very useful information on the methods they've been using in Sebastopol to look at some of these same issues. So with that as a bit of an introduction, I want to hand it off to Adam directly. And now I think we can take that slide down and Adam will share directly, and go ahead and take it away. Show us your work.
All right, thank you, BC. All right, hopefully you can see in the screen, the dashboard. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Great. So, and there should be a link available that you can all immediately bookmark into your browser. Where I wanted to start off was just kind of an overview of the instructions for the greenhouse gas dashboard. It gives us an overview to a little bit of what BC already mentioned, but just a live view. So we're here in the upper right, we can see our menu items, and instructions is highlighted. So that's the page we're on right now. And it shows us the components essentially of the main sectors and some icons, the filters that we can look through and splice the data, looking by jurisdiction, year, kind of the bigger picture activity type, and then maybe the smaller sub activities, and then looking at different cards or indicators. And we actually just added one to this today. This will hopefully be the last edition before we take off the kind of draft cover for this tool. But so we're looking at the average metric ton of CO2 per capita across the years, as well as the total. And we just added the difference between 1990 and then our most recent year, 2020, for total emissions. So we'll be able to look at that real quickly. There is an about page as well. We want to make sure that we can show and explain a lot of this data. This is, again, just a very quick early draft that will be transitioning to a more advanced version, but gives you a sense of where we'd like to go. So moving over to the heart of the tool, this is the main total greenhouse gases emissions page. And here we see the addition of the filters down at the bottom I mentioned, a little map to see where we're zooming in by location. To the right, we're looking at kind of the total emissions across sectors. So we can see, as been mentioned, transportation is the largest component of that. There are some little tooltips that pop up to try to explain then what that value is. So it changes as you hover over it. And then down below is essentially then the table of those same emissions. So as we want to be able to look through and identify a specific city, we can also do a combination of cities. If you hold down the control key and select 2, you can see those emissions. It shows them combined, so you can't actually do comparison between cities, but you can at least look at the numbers down here and do some initial calculations. Looking by year, here we see activity type and then the other activity names. And the last thing to explore at the top are these icon cards. These are the ones that are also fluid and dynamic with what you are looking at. So it changes. We see the total. This is the difference I mentioned from 1990 to 2020, and then also the average per capita. So if you wanted to essentially, let's say, look at the last 2 years that we have data for, that would then give you a different average. It would average the 63,000, 43,000, and get you 53,000 here. So that's the idea behind having a dynamic tool that, yeah, given what your interests are, can meet you. So now as we look forward, moving on to the building section, you can see a similar design and layout amongst the different pages. It gives us a visual proportion of what buildings emissions accounts for in terms of total emissions. And again, that adjusts as you look at different jurisdictions, and as do all the other charts, looking at total building emissions trends, electricity consumption and emissions, and then natural gas emissions and consumption. And then down at the bottom is also one last little, they call them, I think, a tree chart or a box chart, I think makes more sense, to also look at then the proportions of those different values within that particular sector. So here in transportation, you see about 90 million metric tons versus 0.8 for on-road versus off-road. So again, as the data is showing, we do have, I think, something that we're looking at right now that BC mentioned, of both having metrics and indicators. So in this case, everything that we have on here, there actually are some indicators in terms of vehicle miles traveled. Those tie directly into our emissions, so they're not a separate indicator that's independent of our emissions calculations. But just to give you a little sense of some of the data that's on there. And as we have less data, then we are limited, but still very insightful to see these emissions trends, the change in this is a significant drop here for water. So one of the things we've been thinking about for that future iteration is to be able to have some little maybe summary or highlights that can say, you know, this was when Sonoma Clean Power was created, or this was when certain emissions were changed over from fossil fuel to non-burning for electricity. Solid waste, agriculture, are both somewhat limited but helpful in being able to show the emissions. We're looking only at countywide data for agriculture. The other ones are broken out by jurisdiction. And then, as Simone was highlighting, we do have the 2020 carbon stock map on here. And it's broken out by land use type. We can look at the difference between 2013 and 2022. The land use that we were drawing from is from, it's called Landfire. There's a little tooltip here to explain. There were some mapping methodologies that took place between 2013 and 2022 for the land use. So that might be showing in some of those differences you see, but this is again the consistent data source and kind of the best we had available to be able to draw this data together. So if you would like to navigate, I realize I think I need to add a plus minus. Zoom tool got removed from here, which I will add. But one of the points was made about the carbon stock within our wetlands. And so, let's see if I can do this slower. No, not really. Okay, well, it shows a nice dark green down in the carbon of the wetlands in the southern area of the county. So let's see, and I think that should be the main points. The link to the Sonoma County's carbon inventory and sequestration study is available up there. There you can kind of see it coming out a little bit, the dark carbon stocks in the wetlands. So I think with that, maybe I'll stop the presentation, but not my screen, and see if there's any questions.
Well, oh, go ahead. We'll open it up to the committee. Go ahead, Steve. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, he needs a microphone.
I'm so sorry.
I didn't see our goals in this. To what extent do we build the CARB studies into what we're looking for here?
Yeah, it's a great point and something I missed. So our goals are actually front and center here. It's just a static chart that doesn't move, but it gives us our look in the past where our 1990 emissions were, where we are for 2020, and this is countywide, and then what our goal is for 2030. So figuring out, I think, the different goals that we have for emissions across the sectors and jurisdictions, and what mandates or legislation are being required is absolutely part of our focus and the conversation going into the version 2 of this dashboard. We can't make any promises, but obviously we'd love to be able to have that front and center and understand where those targets are, how well we're doing, what's mandating those targets, and understanding maybe some links or something for more information.
So there seems to be a growing difference between the scoping plan, which came out in 2022, and what the legislature is requiring. How do we bridge that gap?
BC, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Adam, I can take that one. I think I don't have an answer, an immediate answer. I think partially what this dashboard is designed to display our kind of knowledge of what emissions are. And I think, and these are important questions, but I think what we need to incorporate is another page or two that really digs down into what are all the goals, local goals, countywide goals, state goals, and this distinction between CARB versus a legislature, state goals, but differing is important. And I think that there needs to be a separate set of analysis that kind of looks at what are our missions telling us, and then how do we get there? And I think that we're hoping to incorporate a number of additional features into this, but in some ways it is, this is a snapshot of past emissions, and that secondary or that next question of, and now how do we ratchet those down and how do we meet those goals, is something that we hoping to build on to this, but I think is a separate effort in some ways that needs additional focus. So.
From the transportation perspective, I'm particularly concerned that CARB is talking about a 25% reduction in VMT. And it doesn't seem that Caltrans is picking up on that very seriously. And they're looking at 100% increase in transit. And the funding for that doesn't seem to be in the budget anywhere.
Planning to fail.
Any other committee comments or questions on the dashboard? Zeno.
Yeah, so I did see that you had a goal there, and I think it would be more informative if also the velocity of reaching that goal was somewhat represented, because there are really 3 stationary points, and there's no information about how fast we're moving. So there could be another graphic that kind of brings that out more, and that creates more an urgency. I had a question about the model that is used to estimate vehicle miles traveled. To what extent is that model calibrated with local data? I also, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I have a few other questions, but go ahead.
Sure, yeah, that's part of our model validation process. It's a big part of it. We look at local traffic counts from jurisdictions and try to match that against what the travel model is putting out in terms of annual average daily traffic, for instance. So that's part of our travel modeling process, which is we will be updating some of the existing land uses for the travel model this summer, actually, to 2023 baselines. So we'll be getting a better sense of the land use and hopefully some of the VMT changes that have been occurring. So
as an expert data analyst, do you feel personally confident that you're doing a good job here in terms of data calibration, that this really is not just like USA-wide or California-wide, but it reflects what happens locally?
This will be my first time doing it, so yeah, my confidence isn't terribly high. I've got to do it first and then see how it comes. But from what I've understood, yeah, there's as good as the data is that goes in is as good as the results that come out. So it's this summer, and for the past year, we've been working closely with jurisdictions to collect accurate data, and we'll continue to do so about the development patterns, both current and future, transportation projects, road network updates, the like. And that validation process you talked about, yeah, is very critical and is based off real traffic count data. But again, it's a model, can only be it's our best guess. So it's as accurate as it can. But I did want to bring it back to the greenhouse gas dashboard also.
Yeah,
well.
I had a question about the electricity component. So as we get more electric vehicles in the county, it becomes important to know more about the greenhouse gas component of electricity generation, right? It's not all solar or hydro. And I didn't see any on the dashboard any kind of information on that. What is going on here? How does it affect our trust that moving to electric vehicles will actually how big a difference, make how big a difference?
Adam, I'll step in to take that one. So I think what's not being displayed here are the coefficients, the emissions factors and the coefficients that are behind the scenes that are used for those calculations. And that's showing generally over time, it's showing our local energy getting cleaner, whether it's coming from Sonoma Clean Power, from PG&E directly, or from, say, for customers in Healdsburg coming from Healdsburg Electric. So we're not currently showing those change over time, but I believe that that would actually be something that would be fairly easy for us to pull out. And in some ways, I would think about that as it's an indicator of the how green the grid is becoming. And so that's actually something, I think that's a great suggestion of something that we could pull out that helps tell the story very much and makes it a little bit more human as far as kind of how this relates to our daily lives. One thing that's not being incorporated currently, and it's on I need to look into how to incorporate it, is we're not currently attempting to disaggregate in the electrical calculations. We're not currently disaggregating what's being used for electric vehicle charging and apportioning that out to transportation. So it's showing basically it's showing our transportation. It's basically, there's this kind of a blurring of lines between transportation and building energy, of which we kind of need to disentangle now that electricity is being used more and more. We're on the transportation side, so.
Yeah, and I wonder, to make it more actionable, whether the information could be more fine-grained. So like in our Sebastopol metrics group that talked to you guys a little while ago, we had looked at DMV data by zip code and noticed probably the obvious thing that EV adoption varies a lot in the county. And that could be interesting to kind of how do we target both resources and do outreach in education around these things. I mean, in some zip codes, it's like 6 times as much as in the lower zip codes. See, there's really significant adoption difference that probably have to do with the wealth of these households. And we really, in order to make this actionable for city staff, we need a much fine-grained set of information. So I would like to encourage you to do that. And then my final point is, how can we make this more fun? Because it's a bit, I mean, is there like a gaming element you can introduce, or a competition between Santa Rosa and Healdsburg? For example, you give absolute numbers for this town, but we all know that Santa Rosa is a large city compared to Sebastopol. So we would like to know per capita, how we're doing in these little communities. And can you draw attention to that and try to explain why Sebastopol is top in natural gas use in the county as a small city? Are we old people? Are we having old housing stock that is leaky? Or we just have it, we love our space and we have big houses? How can we understand these things? I think in order to make it more fun and more controversial and attract more attention, you could bring out these differences more. And then also think about the gaming element. Can there be games around this? I mean, everybody talks about gaming and uses gaming to make things appetizing. And I think we should be able to do that too.
Go ahead, Pete, grab a mic there if you would.
Thanks. I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to say very briefly, thank you, BC and Adam. This is beautiful, visually appealing, great information. And it is kind of static. And I mean, it's not to diminish from the work that you all put in. Just I'm thinking of how people, general population will see this and be able to use it. So I don't have a specific suggestion for how to make it more interactive. But one of the things that comes to mind is En-ROADS, that the online tool that MIT System Dynamic Group put out, that allows one to test different scenarios and project them into the future. That's all. Thanks.
Go ahead, Andy, and then.
I concur with my colleagues that this really looks great and really amazing work. And I've been working on a game for quite a while. So if you guys want to see it, I'll send it to you. Happy to have you adopt it and take it and run with it. And looking at the data, it's clear that all we need is a global problem to reduce greenhouse gases. So my question is this: and maybe you've talked about this before in this group, but is there a way to highlight specific emitters? You know, how granular do you get with the emissions? Can we go down to like know who is emitting what, so we know who to focus on as advocates, as cities, as RCPA? That makes sense. I know there was an effort at ASU to look at, and this is quite a while ago, where the emitters were individually, and then it can help us kind of focus regionally. And then my second question, I don't know if there's a way to put what Sonoma Clean Power's adoption, tier adoption by city is kind of next to each other. But then that also gives advocates and cities sort of a to-do list, like, can you move your tier up to 100%, or, you know, just if you can use the data in a way that gives us a to-do list and gives us a way to focus. Like if we know how much electricity does the ice rink use, and what would be saved by putting solar panels on the roof, something like that.
Just a couple of quick kind of feedback comments. The proposal or the idea about Sonoma Clean Power adoption rates by city and by tier, fantastic suggestion. I think that's exactly the type of indicator that we're looking to bring into in the next version of this. Those tier rates, you know, it doesn't, the way it actually shows in the emissions is kind of obscured, but by showing that, you know, that a certain city, showing how a certain jurisdiction has increased over time, their adoption is, I think, exactly what we're looking for. On targeting specific emitters, that's a little bit difficult. Most of the data we use is aggregated at the city level, at the jurisdictional level, and specifically thinking about the utility data we get from PG&E, they actually intentionally obscure all names, all account information, and they actually will exclude some of the largest emitters from the data if they're so large in the data set that they could be identified. And that goes back to statewide, but it goes back to statewide CPUC guidance that has been given by the state to the utilities on the release of the data. And in short, the utilities, I don't really want to release this data. The state has said you must release this data, but with these parameters to obscure some, basically it's you know, privacy, kind of individual privacy rules. So in that case, most of our views are a little bit more, need to be a little bit more general and agnostic, and then we can use other tools or other methods to kind of zoom in and say like, hey, here's an area here. We know that this is a large electric user. Let's focus some efforts here. So
I wonder if it seems like if the emitters are emitting into our public atmosphere, that their pollution should be public record. So maybe as a region, we could advocate for that.
Sounds too logical.
After the revolution. When's that happening?
We are the revolution.
I want to be sure we have time for jurisdictional updates. Yes, please, June. Yes.
Yeah, I just, thank you for this tool. It's been very helpful. Agree with what others have said, comments. And I just wondered if you could give us your best estimate as far as timeline. You know, you got another laundry list of other things to do, and I know you have ongoing updates, and you had mentioned equity and resiliency indicators. And I wondered, you know, when this version will go live, when realistically would the next edition be for equity and resiliency indicators, and whether you have identified a sense of like what the equity indicators will be, you know, just when we might see a little more information about what those are going to look like, and, you know, how frequently you're going to be able to come back and make all these additional changes that all these great ideas keep getting thrown at you for more and more things to add on, you know, what's realistic and what's likely to come when.
Here, I'll step in first and then let Adam continue. Currently, right now, we're working on the 2022 inventory. So that'll be similar data that's already in there. Our plan is that is the next, we're going to kind of do a freeze on this version of the software, get it posted to our website. We'll then bring in the 2022 data as soon as it's available this summer. And then Adam is currently working with an intern who is doing that indicator research. And Adam, let me hand it to you to respond on that specific bit of research that you're working on with Matthew.
Yeah, so I think that research should be going through its internal review over the next month, and should be able to bring it back to this committee potentially at the next meeting. I think that's in 2 months. Is that right?
3 months, quarterly.
Quarterly. Okay, so yeah, most definitely quarterly. We can bring that back. And yeah, we definitely would value your input. Our timeline for making that tool, the version 2 tool, is looking towards the end of this year about. So it's a summer project that we'll be focusing on.
Excellent. I do want to be sure that we open up for public comment on this item. If there's any online or in the room, public comments.
John, I see your hand. Do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I just want to support what's just been said and some of the suggestions that were made. This is a very, very powerful model with the data that's being generated and given. So several of the comments, one of the things that Pete Gang was talking about, the En-ROADS, which I've looked at quite intensively also, is for decision-making tools. And I would like to compliment you, but also we need to get this in the hands of each of the cities. I know in Petaluma, and then we can look at scenarios. If we did this, how much will this decrease over time? If we have some more predictive abilities a bit, if we look at the data going down and then individually, if we do this, will that change it very much? Because the goal that was being set, even with the decreases that we're seeing on this chart right now, it looks like even with all these changes, it's going to be absolutely impossible to even get within 50% of the goal over time. So we need to come up with a plan that based on this data-driven model here. So it's going to be really important to convince the public that yes, we can reach the goal, and how do we reach the goal, and what do we need to do first? So making this public and getting this information out, and then with suggestions, because if you just put this out there, people are going to say, oh, there's no way we're going to reach that goal. Why should I bother? So that's just a warning sort of in the transition from getting it from where it is now to where we would like to get in the hands of the public and let them see and inform them, okay, we really need to go to clean power. Everyone needs to get off of the regular electricity from PG&E and get into clean power. That's maybe the number one thing that we probably should investigate first. But this model would be very illustrative of what do we do first to get most of the population to shift their behaviors. So I just thought I'd just toss those ideas out. But thank you. This is a phenomenal model, huge effort on this. So please, thank you, and let's get it out there to the municipalities as soon as possible. Thank you.
And just to maybe make one clarification in terminology, this is an inventory.
Oh, did we lose you, Adam?
Not sure what happened. Can people still hear me?
Yes.
So yeah, this is an inventory that is looking at past emissions. A model, as you're describing, is far more complicated than what's within the scope of this project necessarily, of showing the change of what different actions can do change emissions. That's a holy grail that we're obviously all want to get. But just to kind of underscore that at this point where it's kind of an inventory project, there's no modeling necessarily to say if this action happens. It's more of looking in the past. What did we do? Can we infer then what changes were made at a policy level or otherwise that had led to that change?
Steve, did you have one last comment?
Yes. This is a wonderful project, and I'm really pleased to see it. I do notice that we're not dealing with the leakage of gas. And I can understand that that's difficult, but I hear that they're finding ways to figure out how much leakage there really is. So I hope we'll be able to follow up with that and eventually get a picture of how much leakage there is. PG&E must know. They don't want to tell anybody, I'm sure.
Thank you, Steve. And really quick, I will say you can certainly additional feedback on the tool. You can email really any of us and we can get it to Adam and BC for the next version. And then very briefly, I was just going to say Drew did post the presentations from today's meeting on the meetings page, so they are available. He did that.
Is on the meetings page as well as the agenda of this meeting.
And I just want to make sure we have a chance to report out from each jurisdiction, just because we got a little tight on that last time. So I will go ahead and go down the list. I don't see anyone from Cloverdale today. Katati, I think we are empty as well, but Healdsburg, do you have an update, Ty?
Well, just quickly, we're working hard with the city to implement the climate mobilization strategy, but the point that was made earlier about how you're going to fund this is the one that's hanging over us. Did apply for some earmark funds for a micro transit system, so we're hoping that that is going to materialize. And then our Climate Action Healdsburg group is working very hard on our Climate Fest. So I hope that if you don't have anything to do next Sunday, April 21st, on the eve of Earth Day, that you'll join us. The fest has expanded quite a bit. I was saying to Pete before the meeting began that sometimes the success that you have in terms of involving your community almost overwhelms you. We've got massive numbers of businesses now that are participating with us, and we've got over 70 booths that are educational, and we're trying to focus a lot on food and zero waste. And I've been working with one of Andy's colleagues from Zero Foodprint, and I didn't realize how many things I needed to learn about how to compost, what's not compostable in Sonoma County. So I'm hoping that that commercial composting facility and some of the things that we've been trying to help with our food vendors and say, we'll provide you with all the compostable serviceware, but so much of it doesn't work in our county. And so it's been a real learning experience for me, which is why I'm involved in climate action. So I hope you come 12 to 6 in the plaza.
RCPA will have a booth.
Yes, RCPA is going to be there again.
And we will go to Petaluma, and we have Andy and Pete. Andy, you want to go first?
Let the senior representative go first. Just a couple of quick things. We spoke about last time how to get Cool Petaluma spread to other cities. I have sent a letter from Cool Petaluma to Senator McGuire. If anybody else wants to send a letter requesting funding, this is really the time to get your nose in the game for state funding. So come talk to me after if you want to. And then we're the organization that Tyra mentioned is involved in a screening of a film called Common Ground, which is a documentary about regenerative agriculture. It's in the AV Film Festival. It'll be held on April 27th at 6 p.m. It's a really terrific film. They've got a great event planned for that night. There's going to be dinner in advance, and then the film will screen, and there'll be a panel discussion afterwards. So I encourage you all to attend to really understand the possibilities of regenerative agriculture.
Okay, really quickly, three things. I've been focused mostly on several plans that we have in the works in Petaluma, our active transportation plan, the mobility element of our general plan, and our carbon blueprint for carbon reduction, all of which talk about transportation in very specific terms. Just trying to make sure that they're all singing in the same key. About workforce development, I don't know much about it, but I understand that Santa Rosa Junior College Petaluma campus is starting some kind of workforce development program. So good to tag on that. And finally, I appointed myself in charge of zero waste for the Wine Country Century. So if anybody wants to dig deep and volunteer on the day of the ride, May 4th, let me know. Thank you.
Let's see it. But Julie will talk about for go to Roaring Park.
Shirley. That's my sister. My sister's name is Julie. I'm always being called Julie. I wish I was born a Julie. Okay. Really? I love that name. Okay, Roanoke Park. I am on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and we are doing some wonderful things in Roanoke Park and making our community more bicycleable and walkable and rollable. So more to be revealed.
Thank you very much. And then we will, for Santa Rosa, I will pass it on to Steve.
Well, Santa Rosa I've been focused on the Jennings Crossing issue, which is going to be able to get a lot more people interested in riding bicycles if they don't have to ride on College Avenue or Gurnville Road. And that did make a step with the city last week, and it'll be at the Smart Board, hopefully next Wednesday. So we may be able to get that one behind me. It's been a time sink.
Thank you. And for Sebastopol, we'll go to Zeno.
Yeah, the city of Sebastopol, we finally had the climate committee pass the Vision Zero resolution that is now on its way to city council. Sebastopol was one of the holdouts in not having embraced Vision Zero as a framework yet. And our transportation working group has working on wordsmithing and making sure that the language is light and not always committal. Sebastopol has a big budget problem, and that has really put a damper on a lot of activity in the city. The new city manager wants to reduce cost, and so the climate committee has been asked to help with that, and we're losing staff time, and we're having to kind of figure out how to stay effective to the extent that we are with volunteer work that complements the diminished staff. And then we're still working with Transportation Authority on the active transportation plan. And I think that will come in front of the planning committee in May. So they have a presentation on where that is going.
And let's see, thank you. We'll go to the town of Sonoma. Matt, do you have an update?
I don't have anything specific. I'm going to leave that to Tom because he's much more deeply involved, but I have three questions that have come to me as I got ready for this meeting and now being here. One is, are we missing opportunities to collaborate with this group more informally and not once every 3 months? A second question is, I see that even people with the same interests, specifically, not broadly about climate action, but even with specific interests about food waste and that kind of thing, are only finding each other, through a meeting like this. And are we missing an opportunity there somehow? Is there some way we can identify better ways to find each other and collaborate? I've been working on a completely separate project that has to do with bird sound, but have been using Slack through that and find that it's a pretty good way to to communicate on and to not overwhelm people with like a listserv or something like that. So just a thought. And then the third, and I kind of have an answer to this, was how do we get government to move more quickly? And one answer that I got today was, well, make sure good people run for the city council and then vote them into office. I'm just really impressed with Petaluma and the change in the city council there and the progress that seems to be precipitating. So those are my comments.
And I would just very briefly say that in terms of the meeting frequency, that is a question that's come up a lot. And that's something we're going to be talking about, even if it probably would require an admin code change. That said, we could make a discussion item at the next meeting for that. But I think, an option, even if we're not going monthly, bi-monthly, could certainly be a possibility, because we're definitely not running out of content. And so that's something that we'll discuss with the team.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Yeah, so each jurisdiction has 2 representatives here. If everybody showed up, there would not even be enough space in this room, right? Well, yeah, I mean, you get my point. And we often lack quorum. So would it make sense to make, say, everybody has 1 representative and an alternate who can also show up, so that we have more of a chance to actually become an active kind of committee?
That's sort of how it works out sometimes, with the 2 people. I'd have to look back into the history of why that is 2 per, but I think it's mainly so we can get 1 person. But if we had 1 person from each, we would be good. But yeah, that's the other thing, is if we did increase the meeting frequency, we'd certainly have to think about making sure that we had quorums. So that's a very valid point as well. And yeah, so that's something let's discuss. And then, Drew, do you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to say that at one point, Pete and I tried to organize a Slack work group, but we were concerned about violations of the Brown Act. Right. Yeah, it's.
You email 12 members, that's a serial meeting in your violating.
Right. And that's the other reason why we can't be fully virtual here, which would make attendance not be a problem.
But then I just also wanted to add that, about 1.5 years ago, we brought up, this was before Andy was on the committee. We brought up about the Cool Petaluma expansion to the rest of Sonoma County. So I think it's really great that you're contacting Senator McGuire. He's obviously from Healdsburg. We'd like to expand these kinds of programs. And I think if we can create an opportunity for this group to create something like that and overcome some of the obstacles that we might face in terms of meetings and all of that, it would be welcomed by both myself and Stephanie, who's the other representative from Healdsburg who couldn't be here today.
Thank you. And
And
we'll
so
go
to-
ahead and move to Tom
To
here
finish
for
that,
Santa
this-
Rosa.
one comment on that discussion before finishing the Sonoma
County.
City report out is that ad hocs are the way most Brown Act bodies deal with this problem. So that might be something we want to talk about next meeting. City of Sonoma, with our Climate Action Commission meets bi-monthly, but we're having a special meeting on Wednesday of next week to prepare for our budget process. We're going to be getting a presentation from the Bayren representative. Hi. And we are we've had broken into ad hocs since our last meeting to talk about the strategy that we have drafted and are making progress on that. So stay tuned there. I have a District 3 report out too, if you want me to
Go for it.
roll
Yeah,
into
then
that.
We'll go to Tyler. Yeah.
So yeah, and Tyler may be closer to some District 3 issues than I am, but in general, resiliency and adaptation, I attended a countywide meeting on wildfire preparedness, bringing together the wildfire officials and the planning officials from all over the North Bay to talk about our state of preparedness and how wildfires just, what we can do. One of the key takeaways is that while we have reasonably good modeling now of how fires propagate through wild land spaces, we really have no data on how wildfires propagate through neighborhoods, as we saw in Coffee Park and tragically other parts of the state. So that's like a huge gap right now in the knowledge base. But anecdotally, firefighters are reporting that house-to-house conflagration may be a bigger problem than wildland urban interface fuel break issues. One of the things we've been trying to get the county to do is to disclose the amount of money we've been spending since the 2017 fires, the 2020 fires, how much money's been spent on vegetation management versus structure home hardening. The fire officials all seem to agree that home hardening is the top priority, but it seems like there's other motivations for wildfire, healthy forests, other motivations for doing that kind of work beyond the 100 feet line from the house or building. So that's something we're taking a look at and engaging with both federal representatives, Huffman and Thompson about that, and obviously all of our local representatives as well. I just put on people's radar that the general plan safety element and environmental justice elements are in update this year. These are both mandated. This is not the county getting out in front of it. This is the county being obligated to do this before the end of the year. And so these matters, these issues should be probably properly integrated in our safety element. We are, I think, at grave risk in this county of further devastating impacts. And so 1/8-inch mesh on your fence, everybody.
Thank you. And I see Tyler, it appears, has dropped off. So we will, going down the list, we will go to June for an update from District 5. Okay, no problem. Do we want to do a very brief RCPA? Do we have update on activities? Oh, okay. Let's pass her a microphone there.
Yeah, I'm Anna Oliva, and I'm the Bayren Program Specialist and Local Government Liaison with RCPA. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the plethora of acronyms that come out, Bayren is the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. And as Tom mentioned, we're going to be meeting with Sonoma CAC next week to discuss some opportunities to collaborate with the city staff and some key climate representatives on how we can work with the city to offer Bayren support and resources. And I'll also be having a member of the Climate Action and Resiliency Division, Christine Condit, attend as well. And so we'll also be hearing about some resources that are available through the county. And often those are coupled with Bayren resources because the Climate Action and Resiliency Division are our program implementers that are contracted by RCPA to manage outreach and offer technical assistance. And I did just want to offer the invitation to any other CACs. We are in contact with a lot of staff members for informational presentations to city councils. So those will be coming out over the next few months as they fit into the agendas. But we're more than happy to collaborate and touch base on any action areas that we can support for the cities moving forward. If there are any questions.
Excellent.
I understand that the rebates, I think through Sonoma Clean Power, are being interrupted. Have you heard that or?
I'm not sure about Sonoma Clean Power. I do know that the Barron Single Family Home Plus program is undergoing redesign, and so there are
Thank you.
a couple of rebates.
I think April 15th.
April 15th for some of them. Yeah, and I would recommend looking at the website for specific ones.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Any other RCPA updates?
Mhm.
And BC, was there anything that you wanted to share? Okay. All right. So want to thank everyone for all of your great inputs on the various items that have been presented. I did want to follow up on one of Stephen's comments at the beginning of the meeting about the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's rulings around natural gas appliances. So the ruling that will go into effect in 2027 and 2029, and his request to RCPA to develop a strategy around that. And I just wanted to let everyone know, and I think BC has mentioned this in previous meetings, but that's exactly why we are working on the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan, which we know we need a snappier name for that, but that's definitely what we want to address as part of that plan, is how do we as a county prepare for rulings like the Air District's ruling coming, along in a couple of years. How is it that we're going to meet our goal of electrifying and improving energy efficiency in our existing buildings across the county? So we're just beginning that work, but did want to let the group know that it is definitely on our list of items as a high priority. It's a high priority for our board. We don't have all the answers yet by any means, but just to let you know that it is on our list, and we'll bring updates back to this group as that plan develops. So.
Excellent. Well, with that, definitely want to thank Simone for joining us today, and thank you all for coming. And with that, we are adjourned. Until next time. Thank you very much.
Good meeting.
Thanks for coming.
Sorry, I was late.
No, it's okay.